There is some disturbing development that has taken place in Mizoram that borders Myanmar. There are around 2,000 refugees that are estimated to have crossed over to Mizoram's Champhai since Sunday night amid the fierce fighting between guerrillas of Chin Defence Forces and the Myanmar military junta to the Indo-Myanmar international border. The Indian border town of Govt, only a few kilometers from the Myanmar town of Rikhadwar, the epicenter of the fighting, has emerged as the center of the cross-border movement. The two towns are only separated by Tiao River. Prior to this fresh spike in influx of refugees, Myanmar has been sheltering over 30,000 Chin refugees from Myanmar after the 2021 military coup in the neighboring country. Now, with the ethnic crisis in neighboring Manipur, the state government has also had more than 12,000 displaced persons from the Kuki and the Zumi community seeking refuge there. Now, amidst these developments that are taking place in the neighboring military-ruled Myanmar, the situation of crisis has arisen in Manipur as we saw in the past. And now, when it comes to the population of Myanmar infiltrating into Mizoram, what are going to be the repercussions and impacts of this development? Joining me on the telecast is Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee, and quickly a response from you, Ambassador, with regards to the current crisis that India continues to fight in Manipur in terms of the infiltration, arms trade, narcotics trade, and now a fresh standoff between the military junta in Myanmar and the Chin forces that have resisted the oppression of the Myanmar junta have then allowed for the infiltration, allowed for people to again come into the Indian territory of Mizoram. Now, is this a moral and a diplomatic dilemma that India faces with regards to whether the refugees should be given refuge in India?
It's not a question of whether the refugees should be given refuge in India or not, but how to stop refugees from infiltrating into Indian territory without shooting them down, which is against international humanitarian law. You've just explained, Megha, that there is just a river that separates Myanmar from this small Indian town in Mizoram. So the choice to stop the refugees from crossing is not to build a gate or a barbed wire fence. It is to ensure that they don't cross that river. And to ensure they don't cross the river, then you shoot them down. So it's a very difficult choice. The other problem is that you would recall, Megha, when we discussed when the crisis in Manipur was at its worst, that some of the displaced persons from Myanmar unfortunately bring with them the drug trade, the drug trafficking. And in the case of Myanmar, for example, it resulted in the actual growing of drugs in some of the hilly areas of Manipur and then caused inter-ethnic strife, which we are still trying to bring under complete control. So you've rightly pointed out that there are also displaced persons in Mizoram from Indians from Manipur, and some of them could possibly be displaced Myanmarese refugees who were in Manipur trying to harvest the drug harvest, and now they have moved back into Mizoram. So it's a very complex situation, and the reports that have come that the Myanmarese army is taking losses at the hands of the rebel groups, in fact bodes ill for Indian security, because through arrangements between the Indian army and the Myanmarese army, we had tried to bring about some kind of stopping of the infiltration of people from Myanmar into Indian territory. If this arrangement is breaking down, then naturally we would have to move our forces in a way that we can stop the displaced persons from Myanmar crossing over into Mizoram. And in particular, this is sensitive because we are not clear about their ethnic origin and whether some of them would claim that they have relatives and friends in India, and actually they are not Myanmaris but they are Indian, they demand to be identified as Indian, etc. It is a complex issue, which we have to follow very, very carefully. And since only a river separates, in this case, the Indian town from Myanmar, we have to be very, very careful that we don't inflict any losses on civilians, because you've seen for yourself how public opinion shifts. For instance, when the Israeli army tried to bring Hamas under control and there were heavy civilian casualties, public opinion shifted immediately in favor of Hamas against Israel. So these are very, very emotive issues, and our army is very experienced, and I'm sure will handle it in a manner by which we respect humanitarian law, but on the other hand, the army, like the rest of us, are committed to securing India's frontiers. So I'm sure that the army will do what is required to push them back. Megha.
Okay. Major General Gigi Dwivedi, how imperative does it now become to keep our borders in the northeastern regions secure, keeping in mind the military junta rule continues for years together now, and there is a heavy influence of the Chinese that is then ensuring things that are happening in Myanmar are to the disadvantage of India?
Well, Megha, I think first and foremost, our borders with in the northeast are very sensitive because of a number of reasons. First and foremost is the instability in Myanmar, due to which we are having the current crisis of refugees, and it is further complicated because there is a ethnic as well as family ties between the population of India, and especially in the Chin state. You know, the Kukis, Chin Kukis and our Kukis have deep related family ties. And having commanded my division in this area, first and foremost, the border cannot be actually manned, because we have totally, when you look at the northeast border, about 1750 kilometers, we have just about 40 odd battalions of Assam Rifle and paramilitary forces, which actually cannot man this border, you can't seal the border. Secondly, the border is open. And it is not only this current issue of where the river is there. The Mizoram has a 510 kilometer border with Myanmar, especially Chin state, and this is open border, so therefore you cannot actually seal the border. Thirdly, as I said, their family ties, so therefore these people are flowing in unchecked, and as it is, about 32,000 refugees have already poured into Mizoram. So what are the implications and repercussions? First and foremost, this demographic inundation is actually going to cause serious problem, because these refugees, along with that will come the law and order, drug menace, gun running, and come what may. Secondly, the Chinese angle is also very, very sensitive, because Chinese have a huge presence in Myanmar. In fact, when I have traveled in northern Myanmar, it is almost like de facto China. So Chinese have a huge presence here, and Chinese have a lot of give and take with these groups, and they also arm these groups, and they have a lot of ties also with these groups which are inimical to the military junta. And last point what I want to make is that here we require a very, very sensitive approach because of the issues that are brought out. The military force cannot be used. Is some bit of persuasion, some bit of, with the locals you have to strike a kind of a equation and work out modalities. But all said, the situation is very sensitive.
Yeah.
It's not in India's interest. And here we have to man the border and the refugee management, which is the key. Megha.
Major Muhammad Ali Shah, now in a situation such as this, how do we ensure that what happened in Manipur is not replicated in Mizoram, keeping in mind that while we were talking about the ethnic clashes that were taking place, there was also a lot of concern with regards to the infiltration of Myanmaris into Manipur. There was also a lot of concern about this drug trade, narcotics trade and arms trades taking place, with the Chinese influence in Myanmar being the major, most important factor into the upheaval that is taking place on the border state of Manipur.
Right, Megha, that's a very good question. I had the honor of serving with General Dwivedi. He led with distinction over there. In fact, in the entire Northeast Belt, he commanded a division over there. So I can tell you what he has said right now makes complete practical on-ground sense. He knows the area backward of his hand. Now, let me tell you regarding Mizoram again. Last few years, we've seen approximately 32,000 refugees have entered and they have taken refuge. Each time there's trouble in Myanmar, people try to cross over. There's a friendly pact with Myanmar of 16 kilometers that, a person can come across because they have family ties, they have relatives, they have similar ethnicities abroad, either side of the border. Myanmar and India, I would say Manipur, and I would say call it particularly Manipur. These are 16 kilometers packed that Myanmarese, Burmese national can come into India, 16 kilometers inside, and Myanmari and Indian can go across. Now they have tried to come into to Mizoram as well, and I would quote their DC, James Lalranchana. He said that so far there's been no casualty on the Indian side. Yes, there have been apparently, he said there could be a collateral damage on our side due to the events which have been across the border. Now he said we are ready to face that, and officials who have been instructed about it. Now they have been following about 1,000 approximately from what I got to hear was what I read in the news as well, that 1,000 Myanmar nationals were all set. They were nationals of different towns, villages, they were close to the border and have reportedly crossed the Indian side if reports were to be believed. Now at least two of them who had sustained bullet injuries. They were sent for treatment in Champhai, which is on the east of Mizoram in fact. So we can't really say exactly how many of them are there in number, but yes, it is indeed a matter of great concern. And if I were to be, I can say very easily, it's a very simple solution. Seal the borders. But as General Govind Dwivedi said, it is not that simple. If we think, solution, if had it been that simple, we would have done it long time back. On ground, even if we seal the borders, we need someone to man the border. Otherwise, like for example, why is the Indo-China border not sealed as yet? Why is there no line of control? There is a line of actual control with India and China, right? Because it is practically impossible to put a line. I wish one could. Because good fences make good neighbors. Now the very fact is when we have an influx of immigrants from Myanmar, whenever they come, there's trouble there because of the military junta in 2021 in February. And that time, a lot of other groups were formed and they were fighting against the military junta. So whenever there's trouble in Myanmar, they try to cross across. It's not just India, any other border, they would have wanting to come across for refuge and for shelter, for safety. And once the trouble is over, they get back. But is that the answer? No, I don't think so. I do not see.
But isn't there also a threat when there are these Myanmaris who are traveling into the Indian towns of Manipur and Mizoram? There is also a threat that because of the Chinese influence, there could be, like we have already seen, this drugs trade, this arms trade that is taking place is under direct influence of what the Chinese want to then make our borders, make our northeastern towns much more vulnerable to the military actions of Myanmaris, which is then being perpetrated by the Chinese.
Oh yes, Megha. The Chinese angle is something which cannot be ruled out completely. It's something to be looked into very, very seriously because China will always try to make trouble for India. They will always try to do things which would not be in India's favor. So most certainly, this is something indeed very, very disturbing, and it is a matter of matter of national.
Okay, Ambassador Mukherjee, talking about domestic politics now in Mizoram, the voting took place on 7th of November. There have been statements coming in from political leaders, particularly the incumbent Chief Minister of Mizoram, talking about how he will ensure that the immigrants coming in from Myanmar or coming in from Myanmar into Manipur and then from via Manipur into Mizoram are going to be given safe havens. In fact, if we take a look at the initial trends, it is showcasing that there's likelihood of the BJP losing ground in wake of the Manipur crisis, which the Mizoram Chief Minister and his party are gaining total control of, are leveraging to the hilt by going about sympathizing with the refugees that have come over to Mizoram or coming over via Manipur. Now, is this also a political game that is being played at the behest of our security and our safety along the borders?
Well, it would be unfortunate if any person holding an Indian passport, whether he is Chief Minister or anyone else, can gamble with India's national security. Certainly, there would be a temptation to make political capital out of the kind of crisis that we saw in Manipur, which is gradually coming under control. But for me, as a professional diplomat, I would say the following. I would say that, as General Dwivedi has said and as Major Muhammad Ali Shah has said, the borders are porous and the borders are familial, and the borders have been drawn up by colonial occupiers, therefore cutting across family lands, as we've seen, for instance, in the case of the Durand Line, which the Pathans describe as a knife in the heart of every Pathan, because it was drawn up between then India and Afghanistan without any concept of what a border should be. And all ex-colonial states have this problem, be it in Asia, be it in Africa, etc. Therefore, to control such a border and to control an influx, it would have to be done with a degree of humanitarian, humane instinct, which the Indian Army has shown, but at the same time with firmness, because along with the influx of these refugees, you could be having drug traffickers, you could be having Chinese agents, you could be having those who have been instructed to come into our sensitive northeast and foment internal security problems in an area where after a very long time there was security, there was development, and we were being able to forge ahead proudly with the development of our northeast, which had been neglected by earlier governments. So therefore it has to be handled with great care. I would say that we should not judge or misjudge the Mizoram Chief Minister. We should see what is happening. Maybe the Mizoram Chief Minister or anyone else of any other party in this situation would be forced to make the same statement, because he may not want to incite communal clashes inside Mizoram, because there would be Indians of the same ethnic ilk as those who crossed over, who would protest if those who crossed over are treated with harshly. Okay. So it's not just a political issue, Megha. It's an emotive issue. It has to be handled with great care. And as General Dwivedi and Major Muhammad Ali Shah said, these are porous frontiers, difficult to police. That is why the long-standing arrangement that the Indian Army had with the Myanmarese army, which was criticized by some Western human rights groups, saying, how is India making such security arrangements with a military junta which doesn't respect human rights? But we were doing it. The Indian Army and Indian government is doing it for India's national security interests. And if that arrangement is collapsing because the Myanmarese junta is losing control, then we will have to look at other methods to secure our borders, which are too sensitive to be spoken about on national television. Megha.
Major General Dwivedi, then how crucial does it become for democracy to be reinstated in Myanmar? Is there any solution, democratic solution in sight in the coming months and years? Since 2021, junta has taken control forcefully of Myanmar. India has been forced to have a diplomatic association, keeping in mind that we need to control and safeguard our borders, our border states. But how long can we carry on with such a ad hoc arrangement with junta?
Well, Megha, while we have no choice or jurisdiction as to how Myanmar is going to run their country, that is left to the people. But ironically, we have to pay the price for instability that is in the neighborhood. Now, that's a reality that we must confront, and we must also prepare for it. So, first point comes to mind is, I don't think that Myanmar, given its history and present, is going to have stable political environment anytime soon. This is going to go the way it is. and willy-nilly military junta in Myanmar has a very strong hold, and they have always used, I think, extreme methods to ensure that they have a role to play, and that is going to continue. I don't think stability in Myanmar anytime soon is on the cards. Now, as far as India is concerned, Chinese angle have been brought in. Chinese have always hobnobbed with these militant groups, initially with Nagas, then the People Liberation Army, which is a mighty group, United Nations Liberation Front, again a mighty group, and incidentally they have been banned. Yesterday, the 7 of the groups have been banned because of the possibility of their conniving with the new situation. But point I want to make is that India has not given its due consideration to border management. And incidentally, all our borders are very vulnerable. I think we need to have a very clear border management policy, a border management force. There's multiple type of forces operating under different ministries. I think this needs to be ironed out, and especially when your borders are contested, then you require a different mechanism altogether. And the last point that I wish to make is that we need to be now very, very careful and also very sensitive, because situation in Northeast has always been very, very difficult and complex because of the number of reasons. For us, Northeast is very, very vulnerable and sensitive. I think we need to give highest priority to ensure that our borders are manned. We have a clear-cut policy of border management, and more than that, we have to ensure that our locals are not impacted by the situation across the border.
Okay. Major Mohammed Ali Shah, there have been a number of instances that have repeatedly occurred of a number of Chinese nationals who are caught and put behind bars under the charges of espionage, and they have been picked particularly from these northeastern states of Mizoram and Manipur. Now, is there better proof for the Indian government and the Indian forces to then ensure that the porous borders are sealed and they are manned? Because we don't want a situation like LOC or a line of actual control to take place in Northeast as well.
Right, Megha, again, a good question by you. See, it's actually, I really wish they could seal the borders the way it's line of control, it's India, Pakistan. It's clearly, very, very clearly demarcated. I really wish there was a way. But it's since like India-China border, that's a different, little far from there. It is the line of actual control. Here, there is no, the border is very, very porous. So is there any way? Well, I wish the government could have, whichever the government of the day, this government, the previous governments which have been there, could have sat down on it and thought of it, how it's to be worked upon. No, it is indeed very, very porous, and that's a matter of grave concern. Now, but they made biometrics now, or biometrics have just come in and they started the process. That now recently, that's a different thing. I wish they had done much earlier, because frankly speaking, in a very unbiased view, I do not think so that it would be humanly possible to actually seal the borders completely. I wish it could happen that. Now, it is definitely, now whether there is one refugee or they are 100 or 1,000, that doesn't matter. The very fact that even if there's one, it is indeed a matter of national security. Now, I was in conversation with the former Director General of Assam Rifles. I had the honor of interviewing him, General Sangwan. Now, he told me something very, very interesting, which many of your viewers also would like to hear. That, like General Dwivedi would be familiar with that. In More is the place which is at the border of Manipur and Myanmar. In Manipur, I'm talking about right now. So, and Tamu is across. So, there's a red and white bridge, which I have very, very fond memories of, which is partitioning between India and Myanmar. Their houses in Tamu and More, apparently their houses, that's what he told me, their houses where one kitchen opened in Myanmar and the front entrance would be in More. That's what he had mentioned. Now, wow, that seemed very, very interesting. Now, the very fact is, when you have such a thing existing, it's how can one actually seal it and man it. I wish that could happen. I wish we could find out a way of actually sealing the borders completely, Megha.
Okay, all right. a complex problem to find a resolution to, while we are talking about the security of our country, which is of utmost importance and priority. There are also political gambles that are played out by political parties to take advantage of the ground situation, of the people's emotions and their allegiances to certain communities, allegiances to certain groups, and that only causes the problem to escalate. And therefore, a blanket solution to find a solution to this crisis is very, very important, pertinent, and needs to be taken heed of right now. And hopefully, I hope it's not too late, because this infiltration continues to happen in Manipur, in Mizoram, and hoping that an ethnic clash, the sorts of Manipur, does not take place in Mizoram as well.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.